each of us. There is both good guy and bad guy. In the G.I. Joe video game, you can be G.I. Joe, fighting for right and justice. Or the supervillain Cobra, battling other players with laser blasts and venom bombs. You can defend, attack, save, destroy. Play the courageous hero or the unspeakable villain. The choice is yours. G.I. Joe, new from Parker Brothers.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another great episode of the amazing Atari Aficionado. Let's get comfortable because I have a special guest that I'm collaborating with on today's episode. So, let's just dive on into it. Today's game that I am talking about is Starfire for the Atari 2600. Now, this is a homebrew that was made back in 2003. So even though this is obviously already kind of older, this is still a very new game for the Atari 2600, which was a system essentially from the late 70s into the 80s. So the fact that there are still people out there that are making these games, creating these games, and putting them in a physical cartridge so that you can physically play it on your system is really cool and really awesome. It's like you're living in the future, but you're not. You're playing this old thing from the past, but it's new. You know, it's a really cool, surreal feeling. And Eric, being one of the biggest homebrew fans I know, I figured he'd be great for tackling this game. So my really only input will be very brief because I didn't want this video being too long. But Starfire, essentially, is just a very typical space shooter, space simulation shooter where you kind of have your screen and you have your little, your asterisks there in the middle where you're going to be aiming, or maybe it could be bars, or it might be the crosshairs, or, just about whatever you want to put there in the screen. And that's kind of how space shooters always were at the arcade. So when they ported them to the Atari, it was kind of the same thing. And you'll have maybe some dials or some speedometers or some other gadgets or buttons or gizmos, and there'd be a bunch of numbers on the screen for various things, and maybe letters to help you navigate the menu screen and stuff. But, these are all similar sounding games like Star Voyager by Imagic. And like I said, I'll show all clips of these, games here in a moment. I'll show you pictures just to keep the video moving quickly. But we also have Star Master. Star Master came out. And then, then you had like Solaris, as well as Star Raiders, which used the same label on each one, yet these are two completely different games. They're all kind of, at the end of the day, just, your space simulator flying type games. Except, I will say with Starfire, it's a little bit more action-packed with shooting, and not so much about, worrying about running out of gas, or failing shield power, or having to collect maybe certain items or power-ups and stuff like that. This game is more heavy on the shooting. Anyhow, that was really my only input. So, Eric, take it away. And by the way, one last little thing. At the end of the video, you all get a bonus clip of Eric and I driving to Winnie's out in Williamsport. My phone, I forgot that I had been recording. It's a really silly conversation, but I think it fits the episode. So check it out.
Thanks, Jazzy. Hey everyone, I'm the Rook from RetroRook here on YouTube. Friend of Jazzy Jeff and fellow video game collector. But what I really like collecting and talking about are homebrews, new games for old video game consoles. So when Jazzy Jeff told me about Starfire for the Atari 2600, I had to do a little investigating. But what I found was pretty interesting. So Starfire is a homebrew from 2003 programmed by Manuel Rotzkar. But it's also a port of a 1980 arcade game of the same name released by Exidy. But where it gets really interesting is the fact that Starfire from 1980 is actually a Star Wars arcade clone. So Star Wars Arcade was hugely popular back in the day, and it's actually no surprise that clones were made. Not these clones. Anyways, let's check out some gameplay of the original Starfire from the arcade. Unfortunately, sound is not supported when playing the ROM with MAME. You can see the obvious Star Wars influence here with the title. The game is timed, and time is indicated by fuel. The more quarters, the more fuel. The more fuel, the more time. The object of the game is to get the highest score. You earn points by shooting enemy ships. You can lock on to enemy ships by getting them within your sights. As you shoot more ships, their point value increases. They also change color. As you can see, they used to be green, now they're yellow. And their point value is increased too. Now they're worth 40 points instead of 20 when they were green. When they hit you, their point value resets back to 10, and their color changes back to blue. The game continues until you run out of fuel. When you run out of fuel, game over. You can see at the end of the game how many ships you shot, how many times they shot you, and your final score. Now let's see some gameplay of the homebrew from 2003. Once again, you can see that the Star Wars font is used here on the title screen. So in this port for the 2600, you can't actually lock on to enemy ships. You just have to get them between your sights. You can also see at the top of the screen, you have 6 green squares. Those are your shields. When you get hit, they'll turn red. And just like the arcade version, at the bottom you can see that you have your radar showing the enemy ships around you. After you've destroyed all the enemy ships, a portal appears. You shoot that and it takes you to the next wave or level. You can see in between waves it tells you your score. You can also see that they have added some other Star Wars elements. A little Death Star. You can also see that I got shot twice, so my shields, I lost 2 shields. 2 of those squares are now red. Just like the arcade version, the goal is to get the highest score. There's the portal. So the game continues until you're out of shields. You can see it gets a little more difficult in the later waves. And that's it. No more shields. And you can see it shows your score at the end of the game. You can still buy a physical copy of the game from AtariAge.com at the time of recording this video. If you love Atari games and you love homebrew, then you should check out AtariAge.com. You can buy new games for the Atari 2600 on cartridge. Some even come complete with box and manual. Wall Jump Ninja and Halo 2600 are just a few of the homebrews you can get. And not just for the 2600 either. They've even got Atari 7800 homebrews. The ROM file for Starfire on the 2600 is freely available to download and use with emulators on a PC or with a flash cart on original hardware. If you like homebrews, we do homebrew review and homebrew preview videos over on the RetroRook channel. And recently I've been showing a lot of raw gameplay footage from Kickstarter exclusive demos from games that I've backed on Kickstarter. We're also on Instagram, where we post about video games, cartoons, toys, trading cards, TV, and movies from the 80s and 90s. And I try and do a homebrew post every week of a game from my collection. You can find us by going to RetroRook.com or searching RetroRook on YouTube and Instagram. We appreciate all the views, likes, subscribes, and follows. Thanks again to Jazzy Jeff, and hopefully we'll see you guys again. What is... I'm not sure what's happening right now while we're on this road. Now we're behind the mail lady.
Is it telling us to go this way? I can't believe that's the U.S. mail truck. That's awesome that they get. This looks beautiful up here.
I'm confused why we're going this way.
We're going to Camp Crystal Lake.
I don't know what the fuck we're doing. Apparently,
Yeah, I got some horse and buggy action, baby.
oh, he probably didn't like you taking a video of him. Some of them don't like their pictures taken.